Welcome, everyone who is joining us today for our first Omnivore webinar. We're going to have a great discussion here today on Indian agribusiness, Agritech in a COVID-19 world. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kahn, and I'm a managing partner with Omnivore. Omnivore is a venture capital firm based in India, which funds entrepreneurs building the future of agriculture and food systems. We pioneered Agritech investing in India, backing over 20 startups since 2011. Every day, Omnivore portfolio companies drive agricultural prosperity and transform food systems across India, making farming more profitable, resilient, and sustainable. We are joined here today by leaders from some of India's most important agribusiness giants. We've got Simon Wiebusch, the Chief Operating Officer of Bayer South Asia. We've got Balram Yadav, Managing Director of Godrej Agrovet. We've got Sanjiv Rangrass, Divisional Chief Executive for Agribusiness at ITC. And we've got Shubhabrata Saha, Chief Executive Officer of the Farm Division of Mahindra. The idea behind this webinar was to bring together leaders from each of the key sectors in the Indian agribusiness ecosystem, from the seeds and agrochemical sector, from the farm mechanization and tractor sector, from the livestock, aquaculture and dairy sector, and from food processing and commodity trading. And have a discussion about how Indian agriculture and agribusiness is responding to COVID. Our audience here today is huge and incredibly diverse, but many of the people joining us are Agritech startups and people who have founded businesses in this space. And I think all of us are struggling, trying to figure out what the new normal is and how we can respond to it and how we can help Indian farmers come through this crisis stronger and more secure. The last few weeks have obviously been incredibly difficult. We went from the beginning of the lockdown and tremendous uncertainty about how the Indian agriculture supply chain would work. And now, many weeks into it, there is more clarity, things are working better. But clearly, it is a very challenged ecosystem in every direction. And so that's the purpose of our discussion today. We hope that the participants here, that all of you who have joined us from all around the world, we have about 1,600 of you. We have folks, most joining from India, but we have people joining from Israel, the States, Canada, Europe. There is someone out there in Djibouti who has joined us, which was fascinating to see on the Zoom subscription. We hope that you'll ask questions. If you want to ask questions, please use the Q&A option since the chat is off, and we're going to try to get your question answered. But for now, I'm going to turn things over to the panel, starting with Sanjiv, who's going to share his thoughts on how COVID has impacted agricultural commodity markets in India and what he thinks will occur over the next 12 months. Sanjiv, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Hi, all the people in the audience. This is largely a tech world is what Mark is telling me, but let me tell you that I am a technologist. I joined IDC about 40 years ago. So 30 years in technology, last 10 years in agri. I came here for a very short while, but I love the thing. I'm on here for a decade. So what I want to do about is that, IDC has been in agri since 1904. That's our oldest business. So I want to take you into a deep dive into 5 or 6 crops to be able to exemplify as to what exactly is happening on the ground, and then perhaps summarize for you as to what I see happening over the next 10 to 12 months. And so these are crops where we deal with largely. So let me start with rice. So, India is one of the largest crops, 100 million metric tons or 100 million metric tons. Government buys a large percentage of it, around 40 million metric tons. India exports around 10 to 12. We are a large exporter in India, but we lost the entire sale during this COVID period because there's a maximum sale because of Ramzan. So we've not been able to sell anything. The entire pipeline is dry. The sales window is lost. Who has gained? Highland gained from an average of around $300 per metric ton. It's now prices are ruling around $500 to $500. So there is a complete disruption in port logistics due to labor unavailability. Government procurement has stopped. Milling activity has stalled due to labor. So the only good thing is that the Rabi harvest is yet to happen in May. So it will be a slightly delayed harvest. Hopefully things will come back to normal, but sales are lost for most of us. So there'll be surplus crop left. While shipments will pick up, I expect in rice, I think a trend towards slightly organic and food safe rice orders. That's a new trend that I notice in the next 12 months. And then moving on to, I know my colleague is talking about aquas, but since I'm an aqua, I'll have a small little excerpt on aqua. Since we are in that business, who are the largest people we sell aqua to? We are a 50,000 crore business, $7 billion in India. So the largest is US and Europe. They just switched off. There is no supply there. So what happened? Normally you see a crop being planted and then not harvesting. That's exactly what has happened. So the prawn has been put into the stocking activity. The stocking activity, by the way, is down by 70%. So they brought in the main prawns from Hawaii. We did the basic hatchery, but I don't think 70% was even planted. So there is absolutely a 70% reduction in this cycle, which generates almost 60% of India's exports of aqua. So you're going to be terribly hit on this front this year. And what is the other thing that we are noticing? I think some of you may be involved in the export and the documentation. I think the big issue that all of us are facing in all the export is that it's all a physical flow of documents. So the bill of lading has to go in the physical way down to the port, down to that particular country. Only then when they present the bill of lading is the thing released. Can you imagine? There is no couriers, nothing. There are no flights. So I think the world has to change in this. So I expect in the next 12 months, the positive thing of this entire COVID is that I will see a change in the shipping lines and the way they operate. And they will move into electronic form, which is a much needed reform, I would say. Moving into my third crop, wheat. Wheat is our prime thing. So if you are sitting at home eating rotis and chapatis, you can thank ITC for that, because we have managed to running every single factory of ours. We're running that for the last couple of weeks. Though markets have not opened, mandis have not opened, we are managing to procure almost 15 to 20,000 metric tons on a daily basis. And the railways have come to our rescue. We are sending rakes north to south, east to west, west to east. And the challenges have been primarily in the trucking area. So if I speak to startups like Black Buck, where I'm an angel investor, they are all telling me that trucks are not available for long haul, but short haul are available. So every day about 1% or 2% increase is happening. I think it's slowly moving up as and when the drivers come back from Bihar, Odisha, Bengal, UP. But let me tell you, atta demand is healthy. Someone asked me a question that, are your sales going to be down? I think our sales will be up in atta. So atta will be up, your biscuits will be up, your yippee noodles and your pasta will up. And I know people in Nestle, they also have the same thing. Factories are running full blast. And fortunately, the government is allowing all this transportation to happen. The price, I think today, the price is selling slightly below MSP. But the government has done a fabulous job, let me tell you. They have really, in fact, if I see last year to this year, they've almost picked up the same quantity of wheat. How they generate this entire momentum, I really don't know. They're fabulous there. Then moving on to but if you look at harvesting, there has still been a big challenge for me in wheat. we're not being able to get the labor back into the place. So wheat will be impacted by labor, which I said rice won't be. On the chili operations also, which is a large one in India, there is complete unavailability of labor. Harvesting was not there. About 20 to 30% of the crop has been lost. The prices are ruling very high right now, but I expect once the thing opens up, prices will drop. And the thing that is lacking right now is perhaps cold storages. But next 12 months, I don't see too much of an issue in the supply of spices or the turmeric, cumin. I think the biggest thing cumin area is facing is the interest rates which people are charging for giving loans. People need loans. And since the prices dropped, people go for loans. They've jumped up at 30 to 40% the loans, the loan percentage. Because earlier 30 to 40%, the average rate is around 60% right now. Then moving into 12 months, I don't see any significant drop in prices once the initial demand of buyers are met post-lockdown. So this is what I had to say about the commodities. I think there is an impact right now, but if the lockdown gets over by the middle of next month, I think we should see a resurgence. But the biggest issue would be farmers will not have money walking into Kharif. So I wonder whether labor will come up. So I think we're going to face a problem towards December, Jan, when, even earlier, whether plantations will happen or not. With a normal monsoon, I expect a big impact in the Kharif season. That's what I had to say about this, Mark.
Thank you, Sanjiv. Balram, thank you for joining us. It would be great if you could share your thoughts on how COVID has impacted the dairy, poultry, fish and shrimp aquaculture markets in India, and what you see happening over the next 12 months.
Thank you, Mark, for inviting me. Godrej Agrovet deals in milk. We are the largest sellers of animal feed in the country, all types of animal feed. Then we have a joint venture in chicken with Tyson of USA. Apart from that, we have oil palm plantation and agrochemical business. I need to highlight my sector here. We account for almost 1/3 of agri-GDP, which is 5% of total GDP. Agri-GDP, we are about 15-16% of Indian GDP. And we are growing very fast. Last 10 years, we have grown more than 10%, whereas crop agriculture has grown less than 1% CAGR in last 10 years. So we are finding our place in Indian agriculture. So we deal with sectors which are very, very big employment generator and fast-growing sectors. I'll give you some flavor of poultry first. India produces about 4.5 million tons of chicken meat, valued at and about 110 billion eggs, valued at about $15 billion. Just to give you a flavor of how much we produce per week, about 75 million broilers a week and about 2 billion eggs a week, more than 2 billion eggs a week. And when it hurt, actually this sector is a very unfortunate sector. We are very infamous for all kinds of viruses, and unfortunately, any virus which comes, whether it is related to us or not related to us, we take a beating. Be it chikungunya, be it swine flu, bird flu, SARS, anything which comes and we are hit very badly. Unfortunately, this slide in prices started towards the end of January. And you won't believe that in March, the chicken we were selling at about 5-6 cents a kilo, cost of production about $1.2, and eggs we were selling at about 15 cents or so, cost of production of almost 50 cents. So the industry has incurred huge losses. Almost $2.5 to $3 billion have been lost in last about 8-9 weeks in poultry industry. The news is good. I must tell you that the production has come down to half in broilers and almost 80% in layers. The institutional sale is totally gone because all the hotels, restaurants are closed. But retail is picking up because people are locked up at home and they need something to eat. And the prices have gone above cost of production, both in eggs and chicken. Next 12 months, Horeca is not going to come back. Institutional sales will take its time. we need to be very careful about ramping our production. And in case the shortages continue, the industry will be able to recover some losses. Coming to milk, same story. We produce 180 million tons of milk, which is 15 million tons a month. And suddenly, retail was not very badly affected for a long time, but institutional sales, which is almost 20% of total milk sales, particularly the sweet shops, the tea shops, and the coffee shops, all closed, and suddenly there were surpluses. The tragedy was that this was a shortage year in milk. The farmers were getting unprecedented prices for milk at 37, 38 rupees ex farm. And everywhere milk prices tanked by 15 to 25 to 30%. The state government have stepped in. We are also converting about 25% of our milk into butter and SMP. All of us are having huge quantities. We do not know when the lockdown will open, when the consumption will pick up. The only good thing in milk is that the shortage period is normally the summers. So we may be able to consume and not affect prices of milk, and we may consume all our surpluses, which are stored in as butter and SMP. Coming to fish, my friend from ITC already told you about the fish story. This is the fish harvesting season. The fish is in the pond. We are having very good time in feed because the fish has to eat. Hopefully, once the lockdown opens, fish will be harvested. It will open slowly, we hope, so that all the fish is not harvested at the same time and the whole thing is tanked, the prices tank. So we hope that there will be a slow harvesting of fish. The prices will continue. Farmers will make money. The only thing is that the season will be delayed a little. Shrimp, I need to give some good news to my friend. Actually, whatever he said was true about 15, 20 days ago in shrimp. The prices tanked, the export was gone, the hatchery brood stock had washed away. But I think what has happened is government brought in some minimum support price close to about 260 rupees for 50 count. American consumption is low because American food service is gone. But China has stepped in big way. China is picking a lot of shrimp from India. And the best part is that they are value adding and re-exporting it back to the rest of the world. So China exports are going to be major exports in next few months, according to me. Once Europe and America open, then story might change. The other thing is prices have gone back to 250, 260 rupees. Today's price is 250, 260 rupees. The government in the whole thing is very proactive. I must tell you, the brood stocks can be imported from Hawaii once the cargo flight starts. The government will allow the hatchery people to quarantine in their hatchery rather than quarantining at ports. So that is a very big relief to the hatchery people. My sense is that restocking will start. It is delayed by another, say, 3 to 4 weeks. But the season will be delayed, but all will not be lost in shrimp. I must also congratulate the Indian government. Our feed mills were closed only for about a week or so after the lockdown. Wherever we applied with limited number of people with standard SOPs to be followed, almost all feed mills are working. Transportation is improving every intrastate, no problem. Interstate also is improving. So I think whatever is needed for essential services, government is doing a good job. My sense for 12 months, in case we don't ramp up production, we will have remunerative prices and we will have an opportunity to recover losses. But consumption is going to be low in animal protein for next few quarters.
Makes sense, Balram. Thanks for that. Simon, it would be great to hear from you regarding the seed and agrochemical industry in India, how demand has been affected by COVID, and how you think cropping patterns might even change as a result of the situation that we're in.
All right, Mark. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity, and obviously, thank you for everyone to call in. Hope everybody is safe. I believe Bayer is reasonably well known. Basically, we're a classic input provider, where I would like to focus at this point on seed and agrochemicals. But to a certain degree, clearly, the topic of digital is becoming more and more important. So I'll try to always make a bit of a link to the audience here. I mean, on first instance, what we could say, we were in that sense fortunate that COVID struck in a bit of a lean season, if you like, from an input provider perspective. So while I would say my liquidation basically tanked around the call out of the lockdown, which was mid of March, that was the time where there was a bit of cotton seeds moving, but literally we were on the fag end of Rabi. So it was rather a topic of helping farmers to get, where possible, market linkages to get their produce off the fields. So it was more to do with where can we, and here Sanjiv working with ITC, really say, okay, where is their crop standing and which crops need to be taken off. So to that point, I would say it had been a little bit of a blessing in terms of when you look at the business impact initially. Having said that, clearly what we see at this point is what I would call supply is king, and the overriding always will be cash. I think what we're going to be finding in the overall agricultural sphere in India, but probably goes for the whole economical sphere, is cash. So I'm not going to mention it because that's something we need to be talking at a larger level. But at this point, it's really logistics. It is supply. What we've seen is that farmers would revert to brands, they would revert to safety, but having said that, they would take whatever they could get. So at this point, when you look at the agriculture in India being atomized as it is, it's literally being there on the last mile and hoping that you don't have a lot of stock in a warehouse which is in a red zone and you cannot move. So when you look at it, there is a lot of averages being talked about. India is not one, and it is extremely important that you are somewhat diversified across the country because these red zones come and go, and government support is there. Absolutely, I cannot say anything against that. Agriculture being essential, super supported. Even be it production plants sometimes not running at full capacity, the local authorities where, let's say, there is the slightest of opportunity to do something, generally supportive, especially if you have a good connect. And I think this is where long-standing relations really make a difference here, where partnering with organizations which have a footprint gives you a chance. Interesting moves that we do see is that farmers are partly very risk averse also in terms of being afraid to move into the villages, to go to shops. So if you like, a direct to farm delivery is one of the things which is really of interest if you're talking about inputs. So wherever you're able to put up a supply chain, and literally go to the Twiggy or whatever you Swiggy, I think you call it in food. The Swiggy of agri inputs could be a very interesting one at this point. Sorry. So that's let's say what I would say from a pure asset perspective. Clearly, companies with a footprint where we have 5,000 people out there will benefit out of being able to serve farmers closer to their home, right? Where we were also asking around the crop shifts. I mean, one thing is clear: perishables, especially during the initial lockdown, was a catastrophe. I think Sanjiv referred to chili already, but we know it also from tomatoes. And there we do see that farmers are starting to look at, can they move into what I would call government procured crops. So clearly there's more movement towards field crops. There is fear of growing vegetables. And what is also very prevalent is that the price to the farmer is down while the price in the city is up. Yeah, and that reflects the poor logistics. That probably reflects also much bigger losses and a real disruption in that supply chain as we would see it right here. So if you ask us, we're probably seeing cottons and corns of this world seeing a strong boost in terms of acreages coming up. At least that's where I would leave it at this point.
Okay, that all makes sense. Shubhabrata, it would be great if you could share your thoughts on how COVID is impacting farm mechanization, the tractor market, and what the rural labor situation is in India right now and for the next 12 months.
Thanks, Mark, for having me, and thanks to Sanjiv, Balram, and Simon who delineated the scenario in their respective industries, but a lot of generalities also apply to our business as well. But having said that, on the 21st, when the lockdown was announced, we were in the midst of two very important things. One was that regional festivals, which is Padwa and Ugadi, and also Navratra in the northern markets were right on the door. And simultaneously, also harvesting had just about started or was about to begin in most of these markets. And obviously, the industry had a massive crash going into the end of March, which led us to a situation where the industry actually tanked 5% from where we were anticipating a total domestic tractor industry of anywhere between 750,000 to 760,000 tractors sold. We ended up at about 7,9,000. So a pretty significant drop in the industry in the last month, resulting in an overall industry drop from 7,87,000 tractors to about 7,09,000 tractors this year. Now, this is on the back, we must remember, on 3 years of very good growth, 17%, 22%, and 8% in the preceding 3 years. Now, coming into the COVID situation, obviously, there is a front-end impact and a back-end impact. On the front end, we are seeing a lot of challenge. Initially, we witnessed a lot of challenge as far as availability of tractor and implements alongside the availability of labor, because you need both in order to be able to harvest the crop. Now, I think the government acted pretty much proactively during that period and ensured that farming is declared as part of the essential services, which allowed the movement within the state and also intrastate, to the extent that the harvesting happened in most of the markets, and today anywhere between 60% to 80% of the harvest is done across these states. On the labor front, obviously there was an initial impact with lack of labor, but I think the whole story of this migrant labor moving to some of the traditional sources of supply of labor, UP, Bihar, Bengal, Odisha, etc., a lot of people have actually moved back there. And we will see an impact arising out of some of these facets. So that's broadly the front end of life. On the back end, obviously, suppliers have been deeply impacted because of the labor migration and because of the stoppage of supplies. So most of these suppliers would be in the red and the orange zones combined. Manufacturing setups, therefore, are also impacted because logistics is impacted, the cross-docking facilities are impacted, the suppliers are impacted. So the overall manufacturing value chain is clearly impacted. Having said that, the government took some proactive steps on ensuring that during the season, the tractor servicing possibilities, the implement servicing possibilities are taken care of. They have allowed opening of the shops after a lot of effort, direction, and pressure to both the central governments and the state governments, and thankfully that is on, and we've been able to provide service at a time when it is direly required. I think some of the other aspects that are important at this point in time is the fact that this is a period where the crop has been harvested, and the harvesting of the crop normally has to coincide with the procurement in full. And when I say procurement in full, the entire value procurement cycle, which is related to mandis operating, which is related to government procurement, etc., must lead to cash in hand for the farmer. In many markets, as far as the on-ground situation reveals that, yes, harvesting is done. In some cases, because of the non-availability of labor and also movement because of lack of logistics, there are some challenges of goods reaching both to the government yards as well as to the private yards. Also, the non-availability of the artiyas or the commodity traders is causing challenges in some of these markets. However, again, the government is indicating prices which seem to be equal to or better than last year, and that could boost sentiments. Sentiments seem to be positive. It appears, it remains to be seen how quickly the government is able to put money in the hands of the farmers, because that's going to have a deep impact in the way the tractor industry throws up opportunities in time to come. If you look at it now, right after the Rabi harvest, in the next few weeks, we will see going into mid-May and in the third and the fourth week of May, the beginning of land preparation in many of the states. Now, land preparation is a period where the intensity of mechanization is probably at its peak. And that is the time when tractors and implements will be required in good quantum. Uh, the discussions at the grassroots level do indicate the fact that there is going to be a good surge in demand. There is a likelihood of good demand moving into the months of May, June. However, there are some critical aspects that have to play out if this has to kind of pan out well. The first one is clearly money in the hands of the farmer, which is based on the procurement that is happening or will happen. The second is very clearly the role of NBFCs, which finance close to about 80 to 85% of the tractors in the country. Right now, they are loath to doing much. We are anticipating that they will get into the marketplace, hopefully initially to collect the outstandings that are there over the last many weeks, and then go into new tractor financing. The third aspect is there is a complete breakdown of urban rural remittances because of the migration of labor, and that will have an impact in terms of the availability of margin money to buy tractors. And finally, roughly about 57% of the rural income comes from non-farm income. And that non-farm income chain is kind of broken at this point in time, and we anticipate that the government will have to get into development projects to make sure that there is money available. I'll talk a little bit about Narega later on, because that's one thing that has happened recently and more to happen in that domain, which will put money in the hands of the farmer. And I think that's in the short term, we believe that if all of this remains good, there is a distinct possibility of tractors being bought at a time when it is most needed at the time of land preparation. From a slightly longer term view, it's extremely difficult to put a number and a fix on how things will change. We can do any amount of crystal ball gazing, but I think unless and until the fundamentals of the market change, I don't know how much of growth we will see. But it is anticipated by the time it is the festive season, there could be a possibility of a better surge if all of the factors that I mentioned earlier remain in place. As far as the broad trends are concerned, low mechanization, low tractor penetration is here, and we obviously feel and believe that that's going to keep on improving. We also believe that the migrant labor that has gone back, a large proportion of that migrant labor ain't returning back, is the feedback that we have at this point in time. It remains to be seen how that will change out as we go ahead. And that will be an important facet of how agriculture faces in terms of mechanization and so on and so forth. I think one very important change that has taken place in the front end is the utilization of digital tools. I was really delighted to see when people use Google Pay and Paytm and so on and so forth to pay margin money to our dealers and use that also for service payments. So I think that is a very interesting facet that has happened, including dealer salesmen using multiple types of digital mediums in order to connect with customers. The provision of service through DIY mediums, etc., is something that is very interesting, through WhatsApp video calls, in order to enable the customers to kind of do that. So I think that is one space that is definitely going to have a big impact on the way the industry sees itself going forward. Thanks.
Makes a lot of sense. So now we're going to shift to questions for our panelists, and we're going to have 3 questions that every panelist will get asked, and we're going to ask everyone to keep it to just a few minutes each, because we're running a little bit over time. So the first question is, what agricultural policy reforms do you think or hope might accelerate given the current crisis? And I think we're just going to kind of go back and start with Sanjiv again. So, ag policy reforms, obviously many things have been talked about for decades, right? APMC reforms have been talked about for decades, 20 years now. Opening up rural procurement. what do you think is actually going to happen as a result of COVID? And do you think those reforms will be rolled back when the crisis is over, or will stick with us? So start with Sanjiv, then Balram, then Simon, then Shubhabrata.
I think I have 3 or 4 reforms that I'm thinking of, and we're currently working with various people in the agriculture ministry also. So you would notice, interestingly, a trend. You just talked about APMC, right? I think they're suspending APMC in some places for a period of 6 months. I think I see something more in it. The APMC Act, since the state has a larger say, I think they may bring about freeing this from the clutches of the traders. I see multiple mini mandis coming across. I see, individuals, corporates, FPOs, self-help groups, cooperatives to buy directly from farmers at whatever negotiated price or based on the mandi price. So mandi, which used to be earlier the hold of a few people, I think, licensed traders, I think that may free up, which is what the government has been wanting. I think they're working on something. I think the next 10, 15 days, we may see something. The next one I see is the Essential Commodities Act. I think from the staple area, I think we have a surplus. We should try and allow people to hold more bulk stocks over the present limits. That should be relaxed. The ENAM platform, I see a golden opportunity. And Shubhabrata just talked about the digital part. This is the time. And that's the time I think most of the startups there who can help us in quality assaying, startups like AgNext, etc. If I'm a buyer sitting in Delhi, if I'm buying chili from Guntur, if I get to know what exactly I have bought, I would be far more comfortable. I think ENAM platform, which has not got energized, this is the time to do it. And the last is, I think there's a Model Contract Farming Act in 2018. I think contract farming should also, in a manner of speaking, go outside the ambit of the respective states' APMC Act. I see these 3 or 4 reforms happening, and we're also working with the government, and the way they have implemented the rules and regulations during the COVID, I think should give them some indication that this is perhaps the right time to push the reforms through. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjiv. Balram, what are your thoughts on reforms that you want to see and what you think will actually be delivered?
Yeah, so I agree with Sanjiv for most of the reforms he has talked about. I think never waste a good crisis, and this is the time we can pull the plug on a lot of these things. In addition to that, I would like to see something being done on this wet markets in different cities, which cause such a big problem. If you really ask me, the face of our industry is not the most sophisticated farms and mechanized farms we have at the back end. Face of our industry is that street side slaughter. And that is what causes these disruptions every few years whenever there is a viral attack. I think this is something which cities and municipalities should look at. According to me, another thing which needs to be pushed is also this Pradhan Mantri Bima Yojana, this insurance. And I think a lot of startups in insurance are doing very well. They should be promoted because government can be their biggest customer and they can give them scale. The other reform I would like to see is that I think if they should probably, this is the time to push the FPO movement in this country, because that will give scale and that will give a lot of credibility to put money by different institutions, including the government, into agriculture. The working capital problem can be solved through FPOs. And lastly, I would like to see that scope of Manrega has to be expanded now to probably give some succor to the farmers, particularly in animal agriculture, like pond maintenance, pond development, etc. should be included. Silage facilities, fish drying yards, etc. should be included. So some amount of Manrega money can be directed to these activities, which can help animal agriculture infrastructure at the village level.
Thanks, Balram. Simon, what are your thoughts on reforms that you want to see?
Yeah, I think what we're experiencing right now is a lot of pragmatism, and that goes, be it allowing for digital signatures and online applications for licenses and stuff. And I would assume this goes forward, and I hope it goes forward. Yeah? So to a certain degree, seeing some more digital administration coming into the country, and with this making things more efficient. Definitely the FBO topic has been touched. I also believe there's going to be more e-Mondays, e-commerce type, the direct connect as we've seen it built up now, because some of the existing infrastructure was just not there. And I believe the readiness to use digital tools is that much higher. What we also picked up with some discussions with even some government people was there is may I say, a high degree of visibility on this price divide, where farmer gets lower prices while it goes up in the cities. So I do believe also the government will put more focus on putting may I say, more transparency on where the value chain goes and who actually in these situations is making the money. We have some discussions, interestingly enough, on drones and robotics. So the whole topic of labor shortage seems to open up some avenues with government to look at how can we advance, or even if you like, leapfrog the Indian agricultural situation, because clearly the assumption is the labor will not be the same as it was before. Yeah, be it that people stay in the villages, or be it that people are, literally looking at how can they, how do you say? I mean, de-risk their lives. There will be significant changes happening here. So I do believe mechanization and potentially also miniaturization will get a boost. Yeah, and one thing clearly, self-sufficiency of the country. Yeah, so how many questions have come in now on specifically also edible oils? And what can you do to improve the situation and reduce imports, even to the point of discussing is GM an option is going to reappear.
All right. And Shubhabrata, what about your perspective on agri-reform?
I think I kind of tend to agree with a lot of things that have already been mentioned, which is the APMC, the ENAM, the essential commodities, the FPO movement, and so on and so forth at large for the overall sector. But I would just put a small disclaimer that the views that I'm putting are completely personal in this domain, because there are government elements that are involved in all of this. I think from a tractor mechanization standpoint, to improve that, I think subsidy related business and the approach to that is some area that can be improved considerably. The custom hiring center and the way it operates can also have a very significant improvement. And finally, I think this whole BS4, BS6 legislation that resulted in a lot of challenge for the automotive sector also has an issue in the tractor business, which is moving from BS3A norms to TREM 4 norms, or the TREM 3A to TREM 4, above the 50 HP category starting in October. I think this may not be the most opportune time for the government to look at the costs, which are likely to rise very substantially for any buyer above a 50 HP tractor. And that's something that government should be encouraged to kind of look at this point in time. Having said that, I think the government has done a lot of very good work in terms of the financial initiatives and also digital initiatives. In terms of financial initiatives, the early deployment of the PM Kisan, the hiking of MNREGA wages, the purchasing prices, the revised interest rate of 4% for repayment of the Kisan credit card, etc. This will go a long way in improving sentiments. I think we have to see a lot of scale up in the digital initiatives. I think some very good stuff has been already put on the ground, which is the Kisan Rath mobile app, which facilitates transportation, and the Swamitva Yojana of the central government scheme, which will provide an integrated property validation solution for rural India, which could also go a long way in both covering insurance as well as loans going forward. I think NREGA was just spoken about, and I think that is one area that the government will have to very closely look at, as thousands of migrant workers return back to their native villages and may need work under NREGA for the next 1 year. I think, in short, workers' dependence on NREGA for survival and coping with the immediate stress may have to increase manifold.
Thank you. So the next question for the entire panel relates to consumption, specifically consumption in rural India. So when do we think that's going to start improving? What do we think needs to occur for that to happen? and what role do we see credit playing in this turnaround? And back to you, Sanjiv, on these questions.
You know, Mark, I was reflecting on my consumption in the last 1 month, and I see the pattern completely changing for myself. So you want me to reflect on what is going to happen at the rural end in the total consumption basket? I would say is already impacted because we go to the villages pretty often around this place. I think it is just making the two ends meet right now. I think the fundamental focus is on staples alone. I don't think there's going to be any discretionary spend for some time. And walking into the next crop, if we do not have enough money right now, I'm going to see a bigger crisis happening in the Kharif. If the labor is not available, if the money is not available to buy inputs from my friends like Simon from Bayer, etc., we're going to have issues in the crop. In fact, right now in West Bengal, I think the Bayer is waiting to even send their basic pesticides in. So the governments are afraid. So I'm finding that this situation not resolved in the next 15 days to 30 days will snowball into a larger crisis. So what do we need to do? I think the government has to play a major role. I must say full marks to the government. So far, all support has been there. You want to run a factory in a red zone? They've said, fine. Follow the rules. We'll monitor it. We'll police it for you. They've given. But the inter-district, the interstate boundaries will need to open up and become slightly porous. Otherwise, we're going to land up into a problem. The labor will have to come back. I think there's no single answer to this. I think the composite things will have to happen. The government had promised to give in some money. They given the first tranche of 2,000. They have to push in a lot of money into the thing right now. Like someone asked me, what are you doing with the CSR fund? I'm spending most of them now. Now's the time that the country and the people need it. I think the government needs to push in all the welfare measures right now to make it recover like the COVID thing. When the COVID curves move down, by that time the other curve should be moving up. On the credit part, I think it offers a great opportunity. I told you earlier that the rates are up substantially. I think there are startups looking at it with zero collateral, perhaps they would. And we have enough reason to believe that 90 and 99% of the loans get returned by farmers. So I would say there's an opportunity. Banks are also coming in, but a bit tentative right now. But there's an opportunity. I think if someone can spot a few opportunities in some part of India, they should leverage it. Thank you.
Balram, what are your thoughts on rural consumption, turnaround and credit?
So I would step back and say that what COVID-19 does in future is very important on what is likely to happen, because as it grows, it's very important to understand progression, and the absolute number are important to manage this disease. Having said that, 1.5 trillion rupees is the remittances of migrant labor into rural India, as somebody pointed out. So that is not going to happen this year to that extent. So that is a problem. The second thing is that government will have to front load. Sanjiv said their Manrega spends and the DBT, because they have to take care of the consumption. So no discretionary consumption or expenditure is going to be done. All those sectors will have to be weighed. Most of rural India will focus on number one, their personal consumption. Number two, investment in the land, investment in the crop, because Kharif is coming. That is their source of income. They get to pay twice only, so they cannot miss that. So pesticide will be bought, fertilizer will be bought, implements will be taken on rent, etc. So all that will be done. Credit will play a very important role, but Mark, I'm very scared that credit should go in creation of assets or working capital. It should not go in consumption, because if credit goes in consumption, then we have a very big problem of write-off and other things. Huge. So all depends on what is going to happen in next few weeks to COVID. And I'm very sure, let me just tell you, once this sowing is done, I've been a student of agriculture for more than 30 years. Whenever sowing is done and the crop does not require so much of manpower, all these people will be waiting to come back to urban areas, to their jobs. And I hope COVID situation allows them to do that in 90-95% of the country, and MSME is open and other things open. So I'm just saying that front load the consumption spends, but make sure that the loans, etc., go into creation of assets and working capital to get agriculture cycle running.
No, makes sense. Simon, what are your thoughts on rural consumption and credit?
Yeah, I would absolutely second that. I think in many a way the agricultural sector might be the one that survives this best. In the end, it's a question of time. Yeah? I mean, everything we do at this point would be somewhat around hoping that on the 3rd of May you're going to be seeing more of the country opening up. If that does not take place, or even worse, you would get further waves of red zones and subsequent lockdowns, then this will be a super difficult situation. And as I say, I mean, cash is king, liquidity. If the government is to go via Kisan credit cards, etc., try to give something directly to the farmers, the hope is they would invest it into agriculture, and at least with that, somewhat sustain their livelihood and potentially also be able to make some earnings. I mean, that's the only thing I could see at this point, and I do believe that people see it as enough of a crisis that they don't go out and buy, may I say, luxury items. But yeah, you never know. I mean, that's in the end, you're probably best off in agriculture. But does that mean we're not going to be hit? No, I think we're going to be hit, and we're going to be seeing a lot of support that needs to go into smallholders specifically, and potentially also readiness from our side to write off certain receivables or donate even in areas where you see that they're not able to be buying the seeds. And these are the things we're probably spending a bit more time on right now, really saying how can we help, especially in those areas where already the, let's say, liquidity is not so high in agriculture.
No, that makes sense. Shubhabrata, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Mark, rural households account for about 57% of all India household consumption expenditure and about 54% of India's household income. In the total rural household expenditure, farming and allied activities, which account for 30%, and salaried professionals, which account for about 20%, should be kind of relatively safe in the environment in which we are in. And spends will happen and should happen through that segment. The other half of the non-farm, casual labor, the urban-rural remittances, they are going to be at serious risk going ahead. Now, clearly, there are a few points for consideration for consumption to happen. 57% of the rural income is through non-farm income. That has to improve. Without that, nothing is moving ahead. The second is the government procurement. It depends upon the timing of cash flows and how staggered they are, will help decide money in the hands of the farmers, which will help them to drive that consumption. I think the leveraging of the reverse migration for gainful employment will be a serious case in point in some of the lesser endowed states. The credit availability for the buying of machines through NBFC operations to start in full swing, both for the wholesale and retail credit, will determine how mechanization flow comes in. And also, I think the remittances, which we have spoken earlier, as people come back to work into the cities, will also have a significant driver in the way consumption begins in some of these centers. I think the government has expanded the procurement target for Rabi produce and expanded the procurement centers. I think critical is the procurement timing and the cash flow. The pricing of the crops also will determine how things go about, specifically the major food grains. So that would be broadly the context in which I would kind of see time going.
Makes sense. So one question, probably the question that most of the attendees here want to ask is to all of the panelists is, what do you think Agritech startups should focus on, given all of the challenges we've talked about here today, given everything that Indian farmers and the agribusiness ecosystem are struggling with? So if you were, either starting up yourself, right, or you had an Agritech startup CEO come to you and say, what should I do? Let's tackle that question. Sanjiv, you're an active startup investor yourself. What do you think Agritech startup CEOs should be focusing on right now?
Yeah, That's an interesting area. I think we have to look at opportunities in this space also. So I just put in money yesterday in WeGrow, which is market linkages. Basically, anything which can connect the farmers straight to the final consumption point would be good, bypassing the entire chain. So with more than 50% of the mandis shut, the food supply chain to the consumer is completely disturbed. I think there's an opportunity. If I hear the stories about Ninja Cart, Agribazaar, Dihat, and Big Basket, I think in this value chain, they are doing pretty well. And as consumers get used to getting their stuff straight and maybe at times fresher, perhaps there'll be a permanent change out there. So there's a good opportunity for startups to build market linkages. Second is quality assaying. I talked about ENAM, right? And I keep talking about AgNext also. So there is a big need, if you ask me, if more and more people can come in using spectroscopy or whatever other tools to give I was talking to the people in the agri department in Delhi. If something comes and we can have a uniform standard across India to define that this is the quality of wheat, this is what we mean by the physical parameters. Chemical parameters may take time, but if there is a uniform method, then we can perhaps build a uniform market. So there is a huge market available for quality assaying. Then you're looking at labor services. So my team, which works on e-Chopal, I had thrown in a challenge to them that like the urban clap, create a rural clap. You know, there is a huge opportunity and the labor is completely disorganized and not optimized completely. So imagine that you are, it's like the Better Place, which I think is another startup. So you have certified all the labor. You've also put in money into skilling. I think skilling is required. And then you try and connect these laborers to the farmers. It's a tough one, but I don't see any startup in that. So I'm nudging my people to get into it and perhaps try and make sure that the labor gets the right wages from the farmer and we are able to optimize their work. They take a lot of time to move from one farmer to the other. So you can perhaps do demand aggregation and then move the labor around. So that's one thing. And then mechanization, I think Shubhabrata, Balram, etc. all will talk about it. But I am saying that mechanization is required. If you ask me, we need to perhaps give some amount of, see, the issue that we keep debating is there is so much of, the population is so high, but we are running short of agricultural labor. Why? Because we have educated all our children in the villages. They don't want to do that job. Is there a way to give certain dignity to that job? So I saw recently a video in China where they say drone operator. Can you imagine a person who's operating a drone has been skilled to do it? I'm saying there can be dignity attached to every single job. So looking for some breakthroughs on this front. Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjiv. Balram, what are your thoughts on this? What would you be telling Agritech startups to focus on in light of COVID, in light of this crisis?
I think in light of this crisis and how long it continues, several things will change significantly. I think there are opportunities all around, and there are so many startups in that space already. But I must also tell you that this is a country of 1.35 billion people, and it will come what may, it will continue to grow. If GDP growth is less this year, it will be big next year because of base effect. So I think people will get richer. So I think in all areas we see opportunity in market access, farm to fork, direct to home, ready to heat and eat products, because out of home consumption will be restricted for some time. There are companies like Licious, Swiggy, Zomato, etc. doing this. One thing which Sanjiv also mentioned is that people are not there at the farm now. The kids don't want to become farmers. So there's a huge opportunity for the farm management startups, because the only thing people have to keep in mind is that we will not have very big farmers. The solutions have to be low cost because it is a low priced kind of a setup. So there can be opportunities in IoT driven farm management opportunities, pond monitoring system, animal management, farm automation, which can be low-cost farm automation. We don't have to bring big machines, but we can always do small machines, etc. Plus, a whole lot of services are going to develop. We have seen that in sugarcane. There are specialized harvesters for sugarcane. We are seeing that in our oil palm plantation, that there are specialized harvesters for teams for harvesting palm nuts, and they use a lot of mechanized equipment. Similarly, a lot of startups are starting with drone sprays, silage production, etc. So there is a great opportunity in these services. From feed point of view, I think there is a lot of opportunities, high-tech areas. We need alternative protein sources because cost of feed is increasing. Proteins are now competing with human consumption. So alternate raw materials like microalgae, single-cell protein, insect protein, etc., have to probably come in to lower the feed cost, thereby lowering the cost of animal protein in future. Apart from that, our sector generates huge amount of waste, and there can be a lot of opportunities of converting waste into energy and waste into fertilizers, etc.
Thanks, Balram. Simon, Bayer's been very involved in digital agriculture. What are your thoughts about what Agritech startups should be focusing on in light of the new normal?
Yeah, I think a lot has been mentioned. I mean, for me, I believe the new normal will be a little bit more towards asking the question, how can you really help the farmer? And what would he be willing to pay for, right? So to a certain degree, where we've spent a lot of time on free services and waiting for scale up, I personally feel that there is a lot of movement really more towards saying, okay, the market linkage clearly is one we see at this point, and who can become a consolidator. Yeah? And I think there is the big miss. You're going to be finding somebody who buys whatever it is, 4 or 5 tons of grapes, but you have literally a lot of 200 lying there which need to be sold. And I think that is where whoever is now able to make that link and be quick. Logistics is, as I say, the topic at this point. If you can organize a milk run and give to farmers the inputs that they need at a affordable cost, I believe they will be happily even paying a premium at this point just to get it on farm, and would potentially, if you then have the electronic payment platforms in place so they can do it right away, I think that's where you could benefit out of the crisis at this point right away. Yeah. What I also see, the whole topic of, can you organize farm labor and can you then also deliver it? Yeah. So is it that you can literally pick up laborers at one point, clean them up, get the licenses together, and drive them to the farms so they can help there in harvesting? These are the type of things which I think on the ground right now you would make a significant difference. The underlying trends, which we've all been speaking about, remain in place, but might be actually a little bit delayed as to, is there really the investment there? Are people willing to have that long breath? That is where I'd be a little bit more cautious at this point.
Got it. And Shubhabrata, Mahindra has been very involved working with multiple Agritech startups, even investing in Agritech startups. What would you tell Agritech CEOs to focus on in light of COVID? Shubhabrata, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry for that. I would put that in 2 spaces, Mark. One a little more generic and the other specific, and I'll come to both. So from a generic point of view, clearly patient capital loses patience in such times and tends to focus on narrow band of specific opportunities. And the entire focus is on margins, cost management, cash burn, unit economics, and so on and so forth. And all the starry-eyed stuff of valuations tends to go out of the window. Having said that, I think every adversity brings an opportunity, and capital will chase where the returns are visible. There is a clear horizon, there is scalability, depth, and consumer impact. And hence, I see some possibilities on a generic level in terms of collaboration and co-opetition in some of the spaces where lots of startups are working. The second one at a generic level is cash conservation is the mantra for all, and hence consumers and farmers also will need help in the area of access of capital, reduction of cost, improvement on productivity and yield. And there will be a possibility that a lot of farmers will tend to downtrade, and hence early adopters can be an important element in order to kind of accelerate some of these aspects. I think I'm a strong believer that ecosystems will compete against each other in future, and I think this is where excellent opportunities exist. And because heterogeneity exists in our agriculture systems, it provides that much more of an opportunity play. In terms of specifics, our purpose is about democratizing farm mechanization technologies for enabling the medium and small landholder farmer to rise. And hence, our task is centered around accessibility and affordability of such technologies. And we would be very optimistic in looking at innovative product technologies, product designs, sensors, connected tractors and implements, and so on and so forth, which will obviously bring the cost down for farmers in a sense and improve productivity and yield. The other area is the area of data as a source of competitive advantage, and there are multiple data points and significant opportunities in triangulation is possible amongst firms, and that's where collaboration and cooperation can seriously work. And the third one is how do we kind of make sure that farming as a service, which is about product, services, solutions, ecosystem, along with the mechanization ecosystem, can become a very powerful play at n equal to 1 unit farmer kind of a context. So I think these are all these spaces where I see significant possibilities at a specific level.
Well, I hope everyone in the audience was listening to that. I think most of the participants here are running Agritech companies, so certainly a lot of ideas proposed for people to focus on. So we're going to shift now to questions from the audience addressed to individual panel members rather than the panel as a whole. And the first question we have is for Simon. Simon, one of the biggest challenges facing our sector is agricultural logistics. What lessons have we learned from the past 2 months, and how do you expect the agri-logistics scenario to change going forward?
Yeah, interestingly enough, where we've been looking at efficiency in the past, we were finding that the central warehouse for the country is not a good idea. Yeah, so actually being a bit more atomized beats a efficient warehousing concept, and I think this goes all through. Where you have more distributors and more channels to go with, the opportunity to reach the farmer is significantly higher. And to a certain degree, I believe this will hold also after the crisis is over. It's a little bit of once bitten, twice shy. We will look for more ways to market and obviously look at who can support us best. And interestingly enough, some of the digital partnerships that we've had lingering around, may I say so, even honestly for months and years, are finally proving to have tangible results. We have business happening, and we have sizable business happening. And this is something which I do believe will get more focus going forward, and we believe this is also here to stay. I think it was Shubhabrata saying there's going to be a competition of ecosystems. I personally believe there's going to be a lot of coexistence of ecosystems. Farming will remain analog in many a way. So we can discuss about digital being augmenting the analog farming business, or analog still augmenting a better digital model. But I believe what digital players need to keep in mind, there's always going to be that asset moving through, or that crop which is physically going to be there and needs to be moved. And there needs to be more and more a one-stop shop for the farmer, which can be several companies cooperating and helping to make ends meet and basically connect the dots, if you like. But I do not believe that you're going to be seeing everything shifting into that one basket, if you like. That time is over, if you ask me.
Okay, that's a very good response. Balram, we have a question for you. So, poultry consumption dropped sharply given the initial rumors when COVID started, and then now with the implosion of Horeca demand and people not being able to eat outside of the house, so that's kind of gone off a cliff. And the aquaculture sector was hit hard by export market chaos, and that's true of you had mentioned things are coming back, but in general across the world, shrimp is largely consumed, at least in Europe and North America, where India exports to. Shrimp is largely consumed outside of the home. How can stable demand be rebuilt in eggs, in broilers, and in fish and shrimp to ensure farmer prosperity going forward? What needs to happen there?
So, Mark, the problem is our consumption patterns in this country. If you see, we have seasonal consumption. We have so many days when we don't have, we have religious issues with consumption. So patches of undersupply and patches of oversupply is a hallmark of this industry and will always remain. So if you see, some of it has been addressed by milk, because milk is the most secular animal protein and you have reasonably stable consumption, even if you don't have a stable procurement, but it is managed by reconstituting milk, etc. So my sense is that I'm saying that we have to live with that cyclicality and seasonality. But what we should definitely avoid is shocks like which happened recently, which happened during bird flu, swine flu, chikungunya time. I think for that to happen, we have to improve the image of the industry. We have to self-regulate. Processing has to grow. People have to be educated and given confidence about quality and traceability. I think that will steady the consumption. Having said that, I must tell you that this is a great protein. We have had a 7-8% volume CAGR in eggs and chicken for last 10 years. It is growing rapidly. It is a very acceptable protein from hygiene point of view. So this definitely has a lot of opportunity to grow. But shocks like this, what it is preventing us from doing is to invest, particularly in the front end. So there, I think something needs to be done. The processing has to grow. And that is why I'm saying that more direct-to-home delivery, people like Licious, retail chains, modern retail, etc., once they come into play, all this is likely to pan out the way it happened in Eastern Europe and Eastern Asia, which are 15, 20 years, 25 years ahead of us. So that will happen. Other thing which you asked about shrimp, definitely we are not going to get the old demand back. I think America and Europe will take long time for out-of-home consumption. But having said that, they have all not forgotten to cook. So shrimp will definitely be eaten. Having said that, there is some news trickling out of China of some viral disease. Nobody can say anything about it now because news from China is very difficult to get. But in case that happens, China was supposed to become self-sufficient, and little bit of gap there will open some opportunity for us. So I am still optimistic. I've seen industry rebound. We together have seen some very bad times in this industry in Godrej Agrovet Limited, and you see how the industry has rebounded. The best thing about the current crisis is very, very proactive government. Lot of things are changing. Lot of things are being heard. Lot of regulation is being relaxed. So my sense is that all that definitely needs to be strengthened. The associations have to drive it with the government now, with the local municipal corporation, with the consumers also. The best part of this industry is that it is not a poor industry. It has consolidated a lot in last few years. People have really, really made a lot of money. It is time to put that money into use.
No, that makes sense. So Shubhabrata, how do you think farm machinery rental and farming as a services business will fare given these COVID challenges? You know, on one hand, there seems to be a great opportunity. This is kind of their moment. On the other hand, you're all of a sudden going to have possibly surplus labor in rural India as a result of migration out of cities. So for farming as a service businesses, for machinery rental businesses, for the harvester businesses that sweat the asset for 8 months across India, how do you think things are going to fare there?
Yeah, Mark. I think there are two buckets again of type of consumers that you will see going forward from a rental perspective, and I'll cover fast separately. When you look at the rental market in such downturns, typically you find two very clear spaces. One, consumers that have money to pay for margin money and buy tractors. And then there's a whole bunch of people who neither have margin money nor have enough income to buy a tractor. Given the fact that you will have a whole bunch of people who have reverse migrated and a lot of them ain't going to come back, I think the advent of rural entrepreneurs or rental entrepreneurs will be something which will be very interesting. What you need for the rental ecosystem to survive, it's not just about an app. You need to have a buyer-seller or kind of an ecosystem to operate, and you need drivers for all of that. I think there is a very interesting play there. If you look at our dealers, we have more than 2,200 plus locations in the country, which are sales, service, and spares locations. And all of this would be a very interesting play in enabling the drive of local rentrepreneurs working very closely with our dealers. The other facet is that during these times, it's difficult to sell the exchange tractors which have been traded in. And they could actually become a very interesting play because that will help to keep the circulation of these tractors in play, reduce the costs, and provide earning economics for a lot of these local entrepreneurs. So I see that space developing quite interestingly as we go forward. The other phase of FAST, which is about farming as a service, I kind of see a very strong play between the tractor, the implement, and the product, services, and solutions that you provide at a unit level to a farmer. I think if all of this can combine together to reduce the cost, improve productivity and yield, and can be shown in a demonstrable manner, I think it can very powerfully succeed. Add to that the element of the fact that there is a degree of preciseness that you need in our farming. Land is not going to increase. Anywhere between 2030 and 2050, our population is going to reach to the extent of almost equal to China. And that's when you will start thinking about feeding billions of mouths. Won't be possible. And hence, it's extremely important to make sure that you have precision in our agriculture through mechanization possibilities and technologies that will aid you for the same. So a combination of tractor, precision, product, services, and solutions at a unit level for a farmer to transform his farmland into much more productive value creation possibilities is something that we see going forward.
Thank you very much, Shubhabrata. Sanjiv, we've got a question from the audience for you. Digital technologies are still quite nascent in Indian ag. How do you think the current chaos will change the trajectory of digital technology adoption?
Yeah, I'll respond tongue-in-cheek. I think the biggest disruption has happened in the boardrooms, if you ask me. They're sitting at home and they're being forced to use certain technologies, and they suddenly realize, hey, I can do it on my own. I don't need my IT person to come and help me. So, if you personally ask me, I think it has brought about a revolution at the senior management level, right? And for me, that is important because when we talk about it, or when the youngsters talk about it, the acceptability is low. So I believe that I should be able to push in several initiatives which were earlier on the back burner with the people at the top. I should be able to nudge them, look, this is what it is. But nevertheless, I think the fundamentals in the agri space, and those are the basic principles that I've followed in launching our Ichapal 4.0, is that farmer will not pay for any service. It is free, it's a freemium. So you have to build your models around it and you have to start earning money elsewhere. The second is, people come and normally give you data on, this is the smartphone penetration. So smartphone penetration, normally people tend to say is equal to smartphone adoption. I'm sorry, it is only 10% of that. So if I look at areas where we operate, smartphone penetration maybe 25%, only 2% people use the smartphone features. So things have to be built around this reality, and hence, if we had started our e-Chapal in 2000 with a 10% digital and a 90% physical, I would say I'm still at around only 35, 65. There is a tremendous need for us to support the farmer doing things physically. So this outlook of rural, which comes largely from the urban set of people, at times tends to extrapolate whatever they are going through. But saying that, I would say the issues which I had highlighted on the policy and in others, on ENAM, on APMC Act, if it can be perhaps, there can be some changes brought about. If there is an explosion in the number of mandis and the number of buying points, right? And if several agri-bazaars and others are able to operate, I believe that the digital explosion will happen in these areas. They will not happen in the APMC. So the ENAM, the private mandis, etc. That is where I think the younger population who are carefully watching the agri world should be looking at it. There are reforms taking place. They should jump in. There is huge amount of opportunity there to reduce huge arbitrage, 10, 15, 20%, and hopefully make a positive EBITDA. Thank you.
Yeah, our portfolio company, Bijak, is working on just that. So there's definitely a lot of activity in that space. One question that I am going to bounce off of the panel quickly. We've got about 7 minutes, so whoever wants to chime in, this is our lightning round. Do we see any reforms in food safety and food traceability in terms of policies and regulations as a result of the pandemic? Anyone want to dive in? Sanjiv, anyone jump on it?
I think there will be, whether the rules and regulations come or not, I see consumers pushing for it. And we definitely see safety, which was earlier only restricted to Europe, USA, etc., coming in out here. In fact, recently, one of our places where I have an angel investor, Log9, has launched like a microwave oven. They've launched a UV oven. They're just flying off the shelf. You keep your vegetables there, and within 10 minutes, they're safe. I'll tell you several cases in India where vegetables have been sold by a single vendor, and about 100 COVID cases because a single vegetable vendor had the COVID. So safety is going to be the number one requirement for us, and is going to come in every single aspect of our life.
What do other panelists think? Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah.
Balram?
Yeah. So I have seen several issues with animal protein consumption in past, and we always felt that government will come down with several safety laws, etc. But it never happens, because once that goes, and it works for everybody, it works because the more regulation you bring, the more documents we have to keep, precautions we have to take, etc. So very few people want to do that. And I agree with Sanjiv that consumer will change, and what will drive change in food safety is the mode of delivery, isn't it? Now, most of whenever Horeca or institutional sale comes back, they will probably not buy it from the wet market. They'll buy it from processors or from milk plants, etc., etc. So a lot of their procurement will be from organized sector as far as a lot of animal protein is concerned. The second thing is that direct home delivery, say Licious, etc., they cannot go to the wet market and procure, because they will be the final phase of the quality they deliver. So they will drive at the back end. I also feel that the revolution which Swiggy, etc., will bring will be in semi-cooked food also. because ultimately the food deliveries may grow rapidly, but all that food has to be created somewhere. So you will have companies which will create this semi-cooked food, like the back end of McDonald's and back end of KFC, etc. And only the final preparation is done in the small shop, and then it is delivered. So the mode in which the food will be delivered will drive lot of food safety, which will all be driven by consumers.
So you're saying that sort of the stage before the cloud kitchen is going to start getting organized?
Absolutely, because I'm saying that one of the big, we have a product called Yummies, which are heat and eat products. ITC has also got into that. I think one of our biggest competitors in future is going to be Swiggy.
Yep, that certainly.
And it is not that the opportunity is lost for us. We will become a big supplier to Swiggy. We will develop foods for them which they can convert in the last mile and deliver. And it is possible to create Indian foods. It is possible to create biryanis and vadas and freeze them and cook them in the cloud kitchen and deliver.
Makes sense. Simon, Shubhabrata, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, one quick one from me. Volvo has built an entire brand centered around safety. And I see a very significant possibility in the edible sector, especially the perishables and stuff, where a very strong brand centered around safety, especially from the context in which a lot of folks, specifically here ITC and Godrej Agrovet come from, can be a very interesting domain, especially around these times, to take a position centered around safety and communicating it on the brand, communicating extensively as to what you do to bring the brand to the table.
Simon, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think in many ways it's going to be twofold. I mean, everything what was said makes a lot of sense, and I think you're going to be seeing this in the urban areas. You will have people like Reliance Fresh, etc., making sure that they give a safety guarantee in that sense. Problem with food safety sometimes is the perception. So what is safe food? Is it organic food? So there will be drives also towards this. Still, I do believe that we're going to be seeing, especially in the initial aftermath, a lot of people literally longing for food. Yeah, and this is what you see right now. I mean, if I see out here, even in Bombay, people don't differentiate. Okay? If they want mangoes and they get mangoes, they're happy that they get them. So I think in the areas where people cannot afford, you're not going to be seeing a huge questioning on the let's say, where's it come from and is it all safe? Still, the underlying one definitely will go there, and you're going to see much more branded food and safety branded.
Okay, well, we are basically at the end of our Omnivore webinar. We're planning to do more of these in the next few weeks and months. So I hope everyone who is attending, and it's been fantastic participation, will stay tuned. There'll be probably one in about 2 or 3 weeks and more after that. I want to thank everyone, all of my panelists, Simon, Sanjiv, Balram, and Shubhabrata. I want to thank Abhilash from the Omnivore team who helped organize this. And I want to thank everyone who joined us here today. Be safe, stay healthy, and we'll all get through this together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, everyone.